Because so far from the candidates, we haven't really heard any specifics about what the lowest a Kenyan should be, what the lowest salary should be for a Kenyan. Yet we all know what Kenya's top income earners make, those of you in leadership. So can you tell us what you think the least a Kenyan should earn is?
First of all, let's look at the statistics. The World Bank places Kenya at number 171. Only 27 nations are behind Kenya in terms of poverty, measured on the basis of the GDP. We're talking about a country, Kenya, where the GDP is 286 US dollars per annum, works out at 24,000 shillings per year. We're talking about a situation if we were to distribute our wealth equally, each Kenyan would be getting 2,000 shillings per month. Works out at about 66 shillings per day. The cost of 2 kg portion meal, unga, which is why they talk about the unga revolution, is 140 shillings. So these are the statistics that we should be looking at. What is the rationale when you are fixing the minimum age? It should be a wage that is able to give a Kenyan a decent living. But where is it going to come from? I see a disconnect, for example, between taxation policies, particularly with regard to small-scale businesses and medium-scale businesses. Because as we tax businesses, we need to nurture those businesses so that they can produce more, so that what you are taxing them can be more. Because there is a limit to what the businesses can afford. I mean, when you talk about the minimum wage, the lowest paid are domestic workers and agricultural workers. And yet, what they are paid is not enough to give them a decent living. On the other hand, there are constraints on the employers. So we need to harmonize, we need to rationalize. The bottom line is that we must make our economy grow. We must come up with policies that nurture businesses. We must aim to export more than we import.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Mudavadi, I'll come to you because we're hearing about addressing the economic system, providing social services, making sure that, reducing the burdens on the average Kenyan worker. Do you think, perhaps that there should be a minimum wage or not? And we've also heard two of your rivals talk about minimizing the wage bill. But the question flowing from all of this is the cost of our leadership. If we talk about where the money for a minimum wage will come from, surely it will come from, the leadership and reducing the costs that you and your colleagues are incurring on our behalf.
Yeah, I would like to make one observation, and this is that clearly Kenya does not have a good wage policy. We have not reviewed our wage policy on a serious note for a very long time. We have lived with what we more or less had at the very beginning, and it has not been reviewed, bearing in mind that now we have a more open, a more market-oriented economy. So this is one thing that I would immediately pull all the stakeholders together so that we can review appropriately the wage policy. The second point I would just want to point out is that clearly the 8,000 shillings is not sustainable in the long run. Right now, every Kenyan, particularly the poor Kenyan, spends up to about 70% of their resources on food alone. Not shelter yet, not on other items yet, but just food alone. Now, clearly, if we want to help the Kenyan people and make them have a truly living wage, then we must institute certain measures. We must make sure that agriculture can expand so that food can be cheaper. We must tackle aspects of energy production because these are matters that go into a lot of production, and that would help in easing the cost of production and, as a consequence, be able to help Kenyans meet their daily lives. One other thing that is serious is the cost of fuel. I've talked of electricity, but the cost of fuel is so prohibitive. Right now, the common man spends almost 100 shillings a litre on kerosene, which they use for cooking. Now, we have had people talking about reducing overall rates of fuel in other areas. But if you target a blanket aspect, you'll not be helping the poor. So one of the things that I would really do is to continuously focus on areas of mitigating against the pressure that the poor are facing.
Okay, your time is up. So just a quick follow-up. Would you recommend, would you freeze the salaries of the top 10% as the ILO recommended in 1972?
I think we have to bear in mind that
30 seconds for that.
We have to bear in mind that 1972 is way back. But with a clear wage policy, we can rationalize the growth and the situation of Kenyan salary levels at this point in time. The Remuneration Commission is a good step in the right direction, but they must work quickly and have this policy adopted and even endorsed by Parliament as soon as possible, so that we can now move and remove the distortions in our economy.
Okay, Ms. Karua, would you freeze the salaries of the top 10%?
I think it's no longer necessary because we have an organ, a constitutional commission to do that. Not literally freeze, but harmonize the wages. I would give them full support, give them all the necessary backup they need from the civil service and from my government to ensure that they do their work within a reasonable time. I would also make other interventions that help to lessen the cost of living. I've already mentioned about health services and education.
Okay.
But also,
your time is up. Your time is up. Mr. Kenyatta, I asked you the question about the income freeze first. And since 1972, when that policy was recommended, the inequalities, the disparities in Kenya have grown significantly. Would you recommend a freeze for the top income earners?
I think I would recommend a freeze, and it's not necessarily a freeze, but we have to recognize that if we are to retain sanity in our financial management, especially as a government, we have to ensure that our public officers are paid a reasonable wage, but not a wage that at the end of the day pushes other salaries up because we have awarded our salaries that are not in line with any principle. It's just a question of sitting in Parliament and agreeing.
Thank you. Mr. Kenneth?
I think we need to be sensitive. We need to actually look at the higher perks that people earn. And also, we need to think of how to bridge the gap. And for me, we need to create choices so that workers are not left with no choices. And the only way to deal with this is to give incentives to the economy to grow, so that workers can have the choice of selecting where they would like to go. Yes.
No freeze from you. Mr. Dida, what do you think?
My government will recommend not only a freeze, but an overpayment. They have to pay it back. Yeah. Because that injustice, why these commissions and why the new constitution is to be implemented, is just to come up with a healing process. And some of us have very huge debt, and this has to be, the only way is they pay it back.
Okay, back pay. Mr. Kiapi?
I will do three things. Number one, let us make sure there is equity by rationalizing salaries from the top and the bottom. Number two, we need to bake a bigger cake. It doesn't matter how much we argue. If it is the same, we will fight each other for nothing. Number three, let us make sure payment is based on productivity. If you do more, then we pay you more. Unlike now, where parliamentarians sit for 1 hour and you pay them 800,000, and teachers are teaching for 8 hours.
Your time is up.
Yes.
Mr. Mwite, would you freeze salaries?
Safina government would be sensitive to the outcry of the Kenyan people in terms of the salaries and allowances earned, for example, by members of parliament, ministers, PAs, and what have you, and therefore would make a very strong recommendation to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to take those sensitivities into account and bring them down. Kenya is one of the most unequal nations on the earth, and a good starting point.
Your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Odinga, would you freeze salaries of the top income earners in Kenya?
For this economy to grow, we must reduce consumption. At the moment, the current expenditure is just too high. We are just consuming. We will actually recommend not just a freeze, but reduction. And I will begin with myself. I will have the pay of the president so that I can lead by example.
You will
and
have
the
to
others
pay.
follow suit.
Okay, thank you very much.